Welcome to our new show, What Anyone Can Do podcast with Leo Bottary and me, Randy Cantrell. Our new show picks up where our last show, Year of the Peer, left off, highlighting the simple truth that who you surround yourself with matters, and that if we enlist the support of others, give back to those who give to us, and pay it forward for the next generation, we can do anything. Author and keynote speaker Leo Bottary and I will interview a diverse group of thought leaders who will share stories and insights that will help you succeed in business and in life. How? By doing the things anyone can do, but most of us never will. On today's episode of What Anyone Can Do podcast, Leo and I discuss reframing. Do you ever wonder how your own circumstances and challenges can appear to be so complicated while you can assess somebody else's situation with crystal clear clarity? Check out this week's conversation about how the people who surround us can help us reframe how we see ourselves, our situations, and our possibilities in exciting new ways. Also, we'll discuss an update on Leo's new book, What Anyone Can Do, how surrounding yourself with the right people will drive change, opportunity, and personal growth. Welcome to another episode of What Anyone Can Do. Leo Bottary, Randy Cantrell. We're glad to come back to you, give you a little bit of an update, kind of a break between our discussions. And we don't want to make this a pitch fest, but Leo's book is going to come out September the 8th. What Anyone Can Do. It is subtitled, How Surrounding Yourself with the Right People Will Drive Change, Opportunity, and Personal Growth. We're going to keep you updated and hope you'll look out for that book and pre-purchase it. Welcome, Leo. It's good to talk to you.
Hey, thanks. And yeah, between our conversations that we'll have back and forth from time to time, of course, we have some terrific guests all the weeks in the middle. And it's been just so great. You know, it's so great to learn from each of these guests that we have on the show, and also with the workshops I'm out there continuing to do and all that. It's just such a learning experience each and every day. And, you know, one of the things that has come up really recently, I know you and I were chatting about this, is I think everyone can relate to the idea that when someone else has a problem, man, we're all over it. We can see it as clear as day, like exactly kind of what their situation is. We're full of advice and ideas and things. But yet when we have our own situation sometimes that we're trying to, get some answers to, it seems foggy. It seems like we have no clarity about it at all. We have all these things in our head and all these competing voices and all. And this is, I think, where it shows how powerful it can be to be surrounded by people that can help us sort that out, you know, to help give us clarity when we don't always have it sometimes. And, it's been kind of really interesting to see that play out, not only in terms of challenges people have, but also in terms of the way people around us can help us not only see ourselves, but reframe our circumstances.
Do you feel like that we are, because I'm seeing it in some of my work, just the obvious need for that, which everybody with a brain in their head can recognize, and yet still some resistance to open themselves up and to be vulnerable and even let people serve them. I can talk to leaders who absolutely positively believe that there is no way that leadership can happen unless there's service attached. And yet they themselves can find it so difficult to be served, especially in a way that's that personal and that's that vulnerable. I mean, is there something deeper going on there with that resistance? Is it ego?
Well,
is it?
I think in most cases, because we're so taught to put our best face forward and that we can kind of handle stuff, that we don't ever want to admit that maybe I'm confused about something. Maybe I'm having difficulty coming to a decision because I'm not seeing things clearly, or, maybe it's admitting that I can't handle it or I can't figure it out on my own. And there's just really nothing wrong with that. And yet we're happy to help others, right? When other people come to us, I mean, I even consider sometimes, I used to talk about people who are foul weather friends, right? These are the people that if you say things are going great in your life, they're not really that interested. But you tell them you got a problem and they are all about it, right? So,
Yes.
I mean, people do want to help in that regard. It's almost like, it's the car accident you can't turn away from. It's
Right.
whatever. I mean, it's like a magnet, and yet it's very difficult for us, to ask for help in that way. But I'm always, amazed at how people can help us really reframe our circumstances. I was on Christina Martini's podcast, The Paradigm Shift, just recently. And, we talked a lot about this idea of how people can help us see ourselves and reframe our circumstances. And two of the examples that we talked about was when my daughters were interested in climbing a mountain. And we said, all right, you want to climb a mountain peak, here's what you got to do to prepare and all of that. But it's not going to be easy. And it's going to be a good 3+ hour climb. And so if you guys are up for it, great, we'll go do that. Well, of course, they were very excited about getting to the peak. They really were not necessarily aware of what it takes to make that happen. All right. So you get up there and you start getting above the tree line and you start looking at that peak and you see how hard it is. And you're like, really? I got to walk all the way up there. And then you do it for 10 or 15 minutes and you look at that peak and it's gotten no closer than it was 15 minutes earlier. And now your head really starts thinking, well, and as my daughters, one of them said, hey, Dad, I think the view looks really great from here. or my other daughter, because I was talking about the fact that you always have to be mindful and watch out for weather. There's this small puff of white cloud in the distance. And she says, Dad, is that something we got to be worried about? No, we're good. But they were looking for whatever excuses that is this okay to kind of stop here. But granted, it was physically difficult, psychologically more so, because again, every time with every step, you just keep focused on that peak, you focus on that goal, and it just doesn't seem to be getting any closer. And I think we can all relate to things like that in our own life, regardless of what we're going to do. So anyway, what I finally got to a point, they're exhausted and they're looking at me like, hey, we're done. I finally said, look, why don't we climb for like another 10 or 15 minutes, but let's take note of where we are. And there was this like big bush there or whatever, right?
Now, how far from the top are you at this point? When they're
we're a ways. We're an hour and a half from the top.
Okay.
I mean, a good hour, between an hour and a half from the summit. So anyway, I say to them, give me the 10 minutes or 15 minutes or whatever it was. And they're like, all right, fine. We'll humor Dad a little bit. So anyway, we go up about 10 or 15 minutes and they look at the mountain. They say, see, it's no closer than, it was 10 or 15 minutes ago. I said, look behind you. And that little bush, that actually large bush was like a dot. And they just absolutely were astonished at how far they had traveled. Well, once they saw that, then they're like, hey, we are making real progress here, and let's look at that. And then, we picked a spot and we climbed to the next one and we got all the way to the top of the mountain. And to this day, those girls look at that experience and the idea that we celebrated small wins, that we looked at our progress against our goal, not just at achieving the goal, and the difference that made in their ability mentally and physically to get to the top of the mountain. And they also realize that there's nothing like that view from the top either, if you're willing to do that.
Right.
But it kind of took a little bit of mental reframing that we did together. Another great example of that was something that I was taught a while back that I ended up sharing with my daughter. And that is sometimes you run could be a long training day or even a race sometimes where you may just not have it that day. And you may find yourself in the last couple of miles of a very long run feeling like you have to run. Okay. So most people, what do? They'll run until they can't run anymore, and then they walk for a while, and then they run again until they can't run anymore, and then they walk a bit. And what you end up doing is just succumbing to repeated defeats because you just can't do it for another step. So you start walking and you kind of repeat that activity. So one thing I was told by an experienced runner was, and I shared this along, was actually if you pick a spot, run to it, declare victory, and then walk until you're kind of ready to run again, pick another spot ahead, do the same thing. it completely changes the mental attitude you have, because now everything's a win as you go through between now and the end. It's not just debilitating,
Right.
terrible
Makes
exercise
sense.
that you deal with, right? But I think these are the kinds of things that when we surround ourselves with really good people, they not only, I think, give us a clear picture of who we are, but I think they also can help us reframe our circumstances, and they can help us shed self-limiting beliefs in ways that I think are incredibly powerful. And in the book, we talk a lot about these kinds of things. This idea that when left to our own devices, if any one of us were on that mountain that day by ourselves, not in a million years are we going all the way to the top. That doesn't mean no one can do that, but I'm suggesting very few do, right? When you really think about it. So I think these are the kinds of things. Again, it was fun to talk about it on Christina Martini's show, and certainly I thought worth repeating here when we think about the value of those people around us and how they can make us see ourselves and see the world differently.
Well, defeat is just too easy,
Sure.
and success oftentimes seems way too hard until we have help.
But a lot more fulfilling.
Oh, for sure.
I mean,
Sure.
like I said, you get to that mountaintop, and that's sweet.
Well, we're going to put in the work anyway. I remember telling a young employee many, many years ago who was not quite satisfied with the role that he was serving in the company. He wanted a different role, but he wasn't, my theme to him is you got to grow where you're planted. He wasn't taking advantage of the opportunities where he was. And I'm like, you're going to show up at work at 8 o'clock. You're going to get off at whatever time, right? So you're here from here to here. He's like, yeah. And I said, then why not make the most of it? Because you're going to be putting in the time, whether you succeed or you fail, still the same passage of time. So.
And the same as accomplishing any goal. We talk about
That's
the
right.
failure rate on New Year's resolutions and how abysmal it is. And the bottom line is, I don't care if your goal takes a month, 2 months, 6 months, whatever it happens to be. That time is going to go by.
That's right.
And at the end, you'll either done it or you won't. And why not just do it?
Yeah.
But I think that's easier said than done. And this is why I think when we make our goals public, when we invite people in, both whether we want them for their encouragement, for any technical expertise they have to give us, or because we want them to hold us accountable, in our own way. And we kind of can invite different people into that, equation. But I think when we do things like that, our ability to do those things anyone can do far more often, just goes up exponentially. So
talk to us a little bit. I'm curious your thoughts of what you have learned, especially over the last year and a half, with all the workshops that you've conducted and writing the book about accountability and just, I don't know, just general thoughts on that, the role that plays in our unwillingness or our inability or our willingness and our desire to surround ourselves with other people.
Well, I probably am now more than I was even when I first heard about this, and I was a little bit taken by it when I first heard it. And now I'm more convinced today than ever that it's true. And once again, I think it's about how we frame accountability. When someone talks about holding you accountable, you're feeling like this. I mean, it makes you feel like you're on your heels a little bit with that one. It feels like you enter into almost a defensive posture with that. No matter how
they're imposing on us.
Yeah, no matter how you try to frame that. Pasi Sahlberg, who used to head up the school system in Finland, one of the largest school systems in the world, used to make the comment that there was no direct translation in the Finnish language for accountability. He said that in their view, accountability is what you're kind of left with when someone's sense of personal responsibility gives way. So I think in terms of accountability, I think it's more not about holding other people accountable so much as accepting personal responsibility for my role and for what I mean to others. And so as a fellow student, for example, when I was, in various programs, my currency with the other students was my sense of personal responsibility that I had to do things on time. I had to do them well. I had to show up when I said I was going to show up. And that's what that was about. It wasn't so much that they were holding me accountable as so much as I was accepting responsibility for the role that I had as a member of that team. I understood my job, understood my role, and it could be different with various group projects and all. But I think if we tend to think about accountability that way, it's kind of I see it as kind of the flip side. When I think about personal responsibility and accountability as one, you could argue maybe it's a yin and yang, or maybe it's two sides of the same coin. But I like the framing of personal responsibility a little better. I think it empowers us. We take ownership of that and we behave accordingly, understanding, as Angela Meyer says, that we matter.
Well, and that's in essence the whole value proposition of it anyway. It's what we accept. It's what we decide. I think the group dynamic clearly has a role to play in that we feel this need to live up to our responsibility, as you say, to contribute to the group.
But that has to come from within, I think.
Yeah.
Having just making people make you feel bad, for whatever it is you didn't do, so that you feel worse over time, can be a little rough. And I think it's trying to figure out how you instill that sense of personal responsibility, in people. We talk about a lot of great teams, and I think the culture of those teams that are really great, whether it's in sports or business or whatever, is that people who show up to work every day committed to doing the very best work they can, to setting their own standard of excellence. And kind of to your point, you're going to be there for 8 hours and you're going to be among this other group of really talented people. I have been invited to participate as a member of this team for a reason. So I've got to bring my A game all the time. That's what I should be doing. No one has to hold me accountable to that. So I think that's kind of something that over the past 15 months or so, I actually feel more deeply about than I even did when I first when that framing was described to me for the first time.
Okay, we see it on the wrist. So let's tell the folks
the wristbands.
What's happening there.
So they are the WACD, what anyone can do wristbands, not to be confused with the WWJD wristbands by any sense. This is not appealing to a higher power for guidance about how I should act accordingly, right? This is very much about if I have a goal, and all of us have some kind of goal. It's small, it's large, whatever it happens to be. So what I do is I put this wristband on and it keeps that goal in front of me. I look down, I see it all the time. It reminds me of what it is that I'm trying to do. It should also serve as a reminder to me of when I engage others and I think to myself, hey, I wonder if this person I'm with right now can help me in some way achieve that goal. And it, prompts me to ask them, and not just keep it all to myself. And then conversely, if you see someone wearing the orange WACD wristband, you can say, hey, I see you've got the wristband now. What is it that you're trying to accomplish? And is there any way I can be helpful in helping you do that? So I think it's going to be an interesting device. It's something that I would love for people when they read the book to either pass it along to others, or maybe it's over the holidays. They can buy a book for a friend or whatever. We'll figure out ways to put the wristbands in people's hands so that it starts to become something that people share, and they start really getting into this habit of engaging one another and listening one another's support and actually achieving the things that they said they wanted to do.
Yeah, and you mentioned something there that it may be subtle for our audience, but I think it's equally powerful. The whole moniker of what anyone can do is not just about what you can accomplish yourself, but what you can help other people accomplish too. The service that you can offer, which I think has many intrinsic rewards all its own.
No question about it. And I think whether it's reciprocating to others who have helped you, or in many ways that's always not possible, right? But what we can do is pay it forward, to others. Think about the number of guests we had on the podcast last year who talked about the value and importance of paying it forward, when they would recall all of the people that helped them get where they are in their lives. And in some cases, they would return the favor. In other cases, for a whole host of reasons, that may not always be possible, but their attitude, to a person was, I want to make sure that I am there for others in the same way others were there for me. And there's no question that that's a hugely powerful concept, and something that can make us all feel really good.
I want to make sure that we link up. I'm looking the publisher. This infogram is very well done, if I might say so, and is a great is a great snapshot of the book. Kind of walk us through this, if you would.
Yeah, when you think about the people plan, and I invite people to look at those infographics, because it's basically kind of a 9-step plan, but it's really in 3 phases.
And if you're listening to this, if you're listening to the podcast or watching the video, we'll put a link over at the website, so you can click and you can see this for yourself.
And it's basically prepare, plan, and play. This idea of 3s, this idea of a little alliteration, something that's easy to remember. Sure. And all that. I think when we think about preparing versus planning, right? Sometimes we're not always ready to just write out a plan. We've got to prepare, before we do that. We got to think about, what is it that we want? Who are the kind of people that could help me get there? And how do I start formulating in loose terms what I'm looking to do, so that then I can start really being specific about my plan, and specific about the people and the dream team that I want to build to help me make that, help me accomplish that. And then under play, and the reason I use the word play is because I don't want all of this to feel like drudgery, to feel like, every time this is all work, and this is all this,
right.
In many cases it's, we can make it fun, and we can, again, enlist the help of others to help us implement, our plan in a way where we actually enjoy doing it and we have fun doing it. And I think when you think about those 3 components of prepare, plan, and play, it really represents something that we can do as individuals. And there's also a version of it in the book that applies to teams as well. So,
well, it's super practical, and it's really well done. And Ryan Foland's simple but powerful illustrations are
his cartoons are amazing. I mean, I absolutely love them. I mean, he did such great work. I think part of, as what we wanted to do, I think the content is not particularly academic. It's not particularly complicated. I think it's very approachable, and it is really something that anybody, anyone can benefit from. And so I thought Ryan's cartoons really, illustrated that level of approachability on that front, So you can probably hear my dog playing in the background here, which is always fun. Argus,
it's all right.
Get his toys out and hang out.
Argus is a shepherd.
He's a force of nature.
He's a good-looking shepherd too. Well, I mean,
usually he jumps up on my lap and tries to appear on the podcast, but today he's just making a lot of noise. But it's all right. So anyway, no, I think to try to give people, one of the things I don't like to do is I don't like to give people prescriptions so much as frameworks.
Right.
And I think it allows for people to, bring their own self into it, to have ownership of what they want to do and how they want to accomplish their goal, versus me or anyone else telling them these are the exact steps you've got to take or anything like that. So I think the framework provides just that. It provides kind of that housing for people to fill in, what works best for them. And I think if you do that, I think you take that framework combined with your own understanding of what that means for you and how you can use it, I think that's where it's going to be successful.
Well, the listeners have probably picked up by now. It seems that most of our conversations with our guests, and I suspect that this will continue, and this just kind of happened organically when we started the What Anyone Can Do podcast. It's kind of a word or an idea that the conversation just seems to kind of gravitate toward. And in some cases, these people are subject matter experts about a particular word, but it's interesting to me that so far the conversations that we've recorded, even the ones that haven't been released yet, have kind of landed on a theme that's very congruent with the whole subject matter that we're talking about.
No, I think that's been right, and I think it's been a nice evolution from what we did from Year of the Pair last year, to this year. I mean, and the same holds true with the book, right? I mean, The Power of Peers was the study of how and why formal peer groups work so well. And what we found in the podcast and what has come through in the second book is that we've expanded that conversation to be really all the people who surround us, not just our peers, but our teachers and friends and kids and that whole circle of support, that we all have, but also to take it out of the strictly formal setting and more into how we just live our everyday lives. And so that's been fun. And it's been really interesting to watch how the podcast has evolved in that way. And now, of course, this year, to your point about how we'll try to take deeper dives into very specific areas when it comes to this question about who you surround yourself with matters. And how does it matter with regard to accountability, curiosity, all kinds of very single topics that I think, help people explore that more specifically. And I think it's lent, some real strength to this podcast this year.
And we are planning, just so that our audience knows, we're going to scatter in a few roundtable kinds of conversations where we bring a number of people in on the conversation. And that's what these are. I mean, these are much less interviews than they're just dialogue and conversation about these ideas to, as Leo said, to hopefully give you, the audience, to give you some framework, to spark some ideas and creativity and basically to help you figure it out.
Well, and the platform, of course, we're going to use for that is Dan Hoffman's Circles platform. It's very new, as Dan describes it, and we've talked about it before. It's not so much a presentation platform as much as it is a conversation platform. And Dan, who wrote the foreword of the book, is just a really great guy. He's very purposeful in terms of what he wants to do and how he wants to inspire people from all walks of life to have conversations that are meaningful, important, and deep for them. I think it answers a very important call out there for people who don't just want to have a gajillion Twitter followers or how many thousands of connections or friends or whatever based on the platform, but who want to have deep, more meaningful conversations with people who share a common purpose.
And we're looking forward to being able to bring the audience, what that looks like and what that feels like.
It's going to be great.
Yeah. I'm looking forward to it a lot.
So good. So with that, we've got a bunch of guests coming over the next coming weeks. We will probably maybe back, do a little show ourselves in early September once the book is launched, and very excited, to update everyone at that point on where everything is. But in the meantime, I'm just so grateful, obviously, to you and all our podcast guests, and the publisher has done an amazing job. Working with our PR firm, Ratner PR, right now, who is doing some good work for us. Katie Ruckin, as you know, is kind of making all kinds of great things happen behind the scenes here. And, so again, when I start looking at the people that we're surrounding ourselves with right now, I can feel really good about what we're all going to be able to do together in the next over the next year. So,
yeah, me too. WhatAnyoneCanDo.com.
There we go. All right.
Thanks. See
you. Bet. See you.
To learn more about our show and what we do, to submit questions to us, and to subscribe to What Anyone Can Do podcast, please visit our website, whatanyonecando.com. What Anyone Can Do podcast is hosted by Leo Bottary and me, Randy Cantrell. Music provided by Kevin MacLeod is Vibe Ace, licensed under Creative Commons by Attribution 3.0 license. Thanks for watching or listening. We hope you'll share the podcast.